Hey everyone, this is Chris. I am a librarian at the Palo Alto City Library, and the following is a talk. As you can probably tell from the title slide here, it was meant to happen at the Scenic Annual Conference earlier this year. That conference was, of course, canceled due to the coronavirus, and I hesitated posting this for a long time because obviously there's some more important stuff happening in the world right now. But if I wait any longer, this will get stale, and I'm really hoping that this is something that you will find interesting and maybe try out for yourself while you're stuck at home. And with all that being said, let's move on. I'm going to skip through some slides here. So this is in the order that it would have been presented at the workshop. What I was trying to do was basically give attendees the same experience that we gave the public at an event called the VR Hackfest that we hosted at the library back in 2019. And if you read the blog post or the editorial we wrote, we go into way more detail than I have time for in this video. But one really cool thing you can do from home, as if you were in the audience, is point your phone over at this QR code. And if it's a modern phone, it will probably have the ability to read a QR code, take you to this address, which is hosted on IPFS, and view the same 3D scenes that students were able to view that day in our workshop. Okay. At this point in the talk, I was going to ask the audience if any of these looked familiar to you at this point. My guess was that they were going to say no. But the reason for doing that was to sort of give you an overview of this entire ecosystem that you might not even know existed yet. IPFS is built by Protocol Labs and a number of developers. It's an open source software which you can find on GitHub. And I believe in the future this is going to be a thing that most people don't really need to know about. The same way that you don't need to know how a web server works, but you can plug in an HTTP address and get to a website. In the future, this will probably be a transparent sort of layer built on top of or next to the World Wide Web. But essentially what we're talking about is a peer-to-peer distributed content system where a person viewing a file can also, if they choose to, rehost and republish that same content as part of this larger sort of global mesh of content hosts. And what comes from that is a little bit bigger than what we have time for right now, but could conceivably essentially replace the need for traditional web hosting as we know it today. Yay, more logos. So on this screen, all I really want to point out is the Kronus group, which is being backed by a number of big names. Kronus is interesting because they're also behind some other things like the OpenXR web standard. They've sort of been the leaders behind a bunch of new standards, web standards, and VR standards that will hopefully create a more user-friendly and also developer-friendly future for this type of web content, we'll call it. Okay, I'm a librarian, so what would be a talk without a story time? Here's the story of the WebXR standard. So back in 2016, some browsers got together and they said, hey W3C, we've got an idea. What if we made it really easy for people to view the same VR content in their browser, and it would all be interoperable. So much happened in 3 years that actually, by the time that standard was sort of approved, the entire industry had moved from being so VR centered to this new XR, extended reality concept, where the worlds of augmented reality, AR, and VR are kind of so tightly intermeshed or interwoven that the distinction between the two isn't as useful anymore. And what that means in practical terms is in the future, you'll probably have some VR equipment that is actually as much AR as it is VR. Kind of feel like this has been beaten to a dead horse already. Did I get that metaphor right? I think I just messed that up, but we're going to move on anyway because this is really what I wanted to get into, which is like what is happening right now in 2020. And I made these slides back in April, so things have changed a little bit, but I think we're still on track here. So, various platforms not so good for the consumer. The video game industrial complex also not so good for the consumer. Surveillance capitalism definitely bad for the consumer. The idea that any free platform that you use most likely means that you, the user, are the product that is being bought and sold through advertiser revenue. And one of the things that interests me about, and I hope interests you about IPFS and the idea of the distributed web is that it would allow for content creators to break away from that traditional, or what is now sort of traditional hosting model, where in order to have more people viewing your stuff, you also need ad revenue to sort of drive those hosting costs. In a peer-to-peer system, that's not as much of a problem. Okay, some good stuff. We do have a few good things to think about. As I mentioned before, we do have these open web standards that are seeming like from the beginning as being built into these tools, which is very nice. Crossplay, meaning that more and more, especially entertainment experiences, are not locked into a specific platform or specific hardware, but allows you to be more mobile with those subscriptions. And then, of course, memes are just never ending, and it's only going to be bigger, I'll say, once you add in VR. Because of that, what of course will happen is everything that was in 2D or is in the old form of media is just like 10x more interesting or entertaining as soon as you throw it into VR. There's like, I think my favorite quote from a past VR conference was like, there's $1 trillion worth of content from old media that hasn't been ported over to VR. And who are the people that are going to do it? It's probably going to be folks like you and me who are the enthusiasts, who are not necessarily doing this for cash gain, but because we love what we're doing. And if there's one thing that you walk away with from this talk, is that I hope you can see that this is something that's not like a future thing. It's available today, and you can start building stuff in your free time while you're stuck at home. Okay. So all of these sort of point to one single idea, I guess. If you haven't heard of photogrammetry and 3D scanning, is that I believe there will be this opportunity in the future for libraries and other sort of media labs to offer tools, offer workshops that let people make this even more personal. So the idea of 3D scanning, for example, is that you can take any object with a few simple clicks, automatically build that 3D object equivalent that can then be remixed or reused 100 or 1,000 different ways as soon as you've captured some essence of that. And where it goes from there is sort of up to the people using it. But then at the same time, we're going to create all this content, and who's going to own it and where is it going to be hosted? I think it should be the people making it, so that we're not as reliant on these platforms that can come and go as they please. With a peer-to-peer system, with a distributed web system like the ones that we're talking about, you can have more control over, where those things go, how it's used. Things like smart contracts and other sort of opportunities might allow you to also monetize if you choose to. But there's just tons and tons of new opportunities provided by these two technologies working together. Okay, and I think I've almost ranted enough here. I'd encourage you to go check out aframe.io. So that was the system that we're using. It's described in the paper earlier in this talk. You can see some sample code and some links to what we were using. The service that we use to host our student files is Pinata.Cloud. So let me just say that there's a number of new hosting services like this that exist. We used it in our workshop for one specific reason, is that we needed speed by our side. So at the time when you were just one person hosting, 10 student files on IPFS, it could have taken a couple minutes for it to get to you initially. From what I understand, there has been a few new innovations in that space that speed this up significantly. The initial sort of discovery query over the IPFS system. But you can also, get a couple hundred nodes at one time, all in one go. There's some other really interesting tools that'll do the same for you, without having to create an account. IPFS cluster being one specific one that would allow you to kind of get a bunch of different computers all sort of working in tandem together. But I've already said too much about that. So those were the two sites that I was going to show people. Obviously, they're at a computer, so now is the time to try it out. I rated these from sort of like beginner level to more advanced. So I think everyone who has used HTML in the past, you can probably do this first part about moving and duplicating objects, because honestly, it's as simple as copy paste. A lot of this is like human readable, so you can change the variables. It says color equals, blue. All you're doing is changing the name in those quotes to a different color. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but the gist of it is there. It's not, let's just say it's not rocket science anymore. Most of these tools are very user-friendly or moving towards user-friendly. So if there's something that you get stuck on, most likely you can go and search on a place like YouTube or elsewhere and find someone who's built a tutorial around your same question. Okay, that is the end of the talk. Feel free to reach out on Twitter. Feel free to message me. That's my email at the top. I hope you found this at least a little bit interesting. I know we sort of glossed over a lot, but I'm really interested to see if you build anything. Please share it in the comments. Yeah, I guess that's the end of the talk. So what we would have done is actually, got more in detail with these tools, a few live demos of code, that sort of thing. But honestly, I think your best bet right now is to go over to aframe.io, just check it out, see what it's about, and then view some of the student tools that we have, or sorry, some of the student projects that we have hosted, and you'll see that you can go straight into the inspector and you can see the code. It's like right there, and you can manipulate it in real time. It is not as complicated or as complex as you might have thought it was. And here's the other cool thing, is that you don't have to pay anyone to host it. You just put it up on IPFS and it's done. You're done. It's online. Okay. /NRant. Hope you have a good day, and stay tuned for more. Bye.